It was a beautiful July morning when I walked down the steps into the courtyard. The well-groomed grass stood out in its greenness against the backdrop of the stone buildings and gravel paths that surrounded them. As a school employee, I had the privilege of walking on this sacred ground. The sun was beginning to warm, and the blackbird began to sing as I breathed in the fresh morning air. Most of the students have gone home for the summer, and I've just closed my lab. I had 8 weeks to spend in this idyllic corner of rural England. However, it seemed to me that I had simply exchanged one prison for another. Yes, I could come and go whenever I wanted. People, especially my parents, treated me with respect, and I was even able to pursue an affair with Wendy, the school nurse. However, I could never return to my hometown again, and I couldn't marry Wendy. I was doomed to grow old alone, with a blackbird as my only companion. Strangely, it didn't seem to bother him like it bothered me. I was still feeling sorry for myself when a voice came from behind me. "Well, if you're going to hide, you could choose a worse place." I turned around and saw a young man leaning against the wall near the archway I had just passed under. He smiled as he spoke. He seemed pleased with himself, but I quickly stopped it. "Are you talking to me? I'm not hiding from anyone." "Come on, Dad. To disappear as effectively as you did, and for no one to find you for more than 2 years, you were clearly hiding. I have no idea what you're talking about. Now, if you are not a parent or school employee, you are on someone else's territory. I advise you to leave and not come back." I took advantage of the privilege of walking on the grass and headed towards the arch on the opposite wall. As I left, I heard him shout after me, "I won't leave until you talk to me, Dad. We have a lot to talk about. Leave me alone. I don't have children. Just go away." I walked quickly through the covered galleries to my apartment. I heard him behind me, his footsteps echoing on the stone slabs. I pulled out the key and opened the door, slamming it behind me. He knocked on the door several times and then shouted through the mail slot, "You'll have to come out sometime. I'm not going anywhere. I just want to talk to you." I was shaking as I started making my coffee. It's been over 5 years since I felt this way. I sat down at the kitchen table and tried to regain my composure. I heard voices outside, and then the key turned in the lock. I turned around and was relieved to see Wendy Turnbull walk in, closing the door behind her. I breathed a sigh of relief. She had a puzzled look on her face as she spoke. "Derek, there's a young man sitting at your door. He claims that he is your son. Is there something you're not telling me?" "He is not my son. He's wrong. I don't have children. I already told you this." "Yes, Derek. I remember and I believe you, but why does this young man think that he is your son? Why are you shaking so much because of his appearance?" I looked into Wendy's beautiful blue eyes. She was the only ray of light in the dark for the last 5 years. She worked as a school nurse at Clifton Manor College and looked after the boys' physical and emotional well-being. Quite a few homesick 11-year-olds cried into her ample bosom, missing their mother. Older boys would give their arms for a hug that was just as comforting. Even in her medical form, she seemed beautiful to me. Over the last 2 years, we had developed a relationship, and we had gotten to the point where we had keys to each other's apartments. The only thing that stopped us from living together was the conversations among the boys and the possible consequences for the school if the parents found out about it. I sat down with my head in my hands. "Sorry, Wendy. There are things you don't know about me, and this young man is a reminder of a time I would rather forget. However, he is not my son. He may think so, but he is wrong." "So tell me, Derek, why does he think he's your son?" "Because I'm married to his mother." Wendy sat up, a shocked look on her face. "Well, that explains a lot." "You mean, why didn't I ask you to marry me?" "Yes, that's the reason why I can't marry you or anyone else, because I'm still married to her. So divorce her. I can wait. I can't divorce her without revealing my whereabouts, although that may no longer matter. Now I'm really worried, Derek. Have you done something? Is that why you don't want to be found?" "I haven't done anything I haven't already paid for, but if they find me, they'll put me back in jail." Wendy took my hands in hers. "Okay, Derek Callahan, First you tell me the whole story, and then we will invite this young man and find out what he wants. It all started a little over 5 years ago, or at least that's when I realized what was going on. They called me Dirty Harry. I thought it was just because I had the same last name as the main character in the movie. I soon learned that there was a different reason. Like Harry, I always got all the dirty work. It wasn't always like this. I worked at Broncaston College for 10 years and always completed my quota of evening and weekend classes, but no more than anyone else. However, soon after John Preston was appointed deputy director, things began to change. At first, I thought that my job was in jeopardy, as my teaching hours began to decline sharply, and I had to offer my help to other departments in order to even get close to the minimum standard. The point is that if you have less than the minimum hours, you cannot refuse the course offered to you. I soon found myself in a situation where I had to work until 9 p.m. 4 days a week, not to mention the weekend courses I was also required to teach. My wife, Jessica, was a faculty secretary, and when John Preston was promoted, he took her with him, so she worked regular office hours. We became like ships passing each other in the night. My sex life was in shambles. I would get home at 9:30 p.m. and need at least an hour to unwind before going to bed. Jessica went to bed at 10 and was almost always asleep by the time I went to bed. I told Jess that I would drop out of college so as not to ruin our marriage, but she urged me to be patient, assuring me that everything would work out. By the middle of the second year of this treatment, I reached my breaking point. My field was electronics, but I had to teach mathematics and physics because, as I was told, there was no demand for electronics. I was somewhat surprised when a colleague who taught a general engineering course approached me. "Derek, I have a little problem. I have to teach a module on electronics, and I don't understand anything about it. I am a mechanic by training. Give me friction, drag coefficients, and balance, that's mine. But this thing that can't be seen or touched, how can I explain it? I have several books on this subject, but I need some advice on how to present it and what practical tasks to give to students." "Wait, John, don't you have enough hours?" "God, no. I'm already overworked because of this. This is weird. I have less than the minimum hours and am free. I can do this for you." The head of my department, George Johnson, looked at me in surprise when I entered his office. "Good morning, George. I came to save you money." "I'm always happy about that, Derek. What needs to be done?" "John wants someone to teach electronics in his course. He's being processed. You'll pay him overtime. If I do this, you won't have to pay overtime, and I'll put in minimum hours and no longer take weekend work." "Sorry, Harry. Oh, Derek, that won't do." "But why not? This is counterintuitive and students will receive a better learning experience if I teach." John himself admits that he doesn't understand anything about this. "Sorry, Derek, but like you, I have to do what I'm told." "Are you saying that someone specifically gave instructions to keep me below normal?" "I can't say more, Derek." Full of anger, I burst into the office of the dean of the faculty. I proposed the same deal and received the same response. It seemed like I had enemies at the highest levels. I moved up the chain of command. Sooner or later, I had to reach someone who could not shift the blame to a superior. Jessica was somewhat surprised when I walked through her office and ended up at her boss's door. "You can't just walk in, Derek. You have no destination. He's busy." I walked in to find John Preston, our assistant director, sitting at his desk talking on the phone. He motioned for me to sit down. I sat there fuming until he ended the call. Finally, he hung up, collected some papers, and turned to me with a smile. "Well, Derek, what got you so excited that you burst in here, interrupting my call?" "I'm trying to figure out who is intentionally keeping me below minimum hours, even when it costs the college money. So far, everything points to you, unless you say you're just following orders and I have to go talk to the director." "I have no idea what you're talking about, Derek. Why don't you explain?" John Preston was a tall, slender man with gray hair and piercing blue eyes. I looked into his eyes as I told my story, hoping that something would give away that I had found the culprit. However, there was no sign on his face when he said that it bothered him greatly that the college was spending money it didn't have. When I finished, he stood up, walked around the table, and opened the door. He looked at me. "Well, Derek, thank you for bringing this issue to my attention. I assure you, I will sort this out as soon as I get back from the Association of Colleges conference. When will this be, John? I'm leaving tomorrow and will be in Brighton for the next 3 days, so Monday. So you will be in Brighton for 3 days. It's near Ditchling, isn't it? I would say Ditchling is near Brighton, but yes, it is nearby. And what? Oh, nothing special. It's just that my son lives in Ditchling." Suddenly, everything became clear. Jessica took time off to visit our son in Ditchling, just a few minutes' drive from where her boss would be spending the next 3 days. It seemed absurd, but it certainly explained the situation. He made sure that I worked at inconvenient hours so that I could not be at home and ask questions about where my wife was. "Are you okay, Derek?" Jessica asked when I left the office. Obviously, I looked as stunned as I felt. I tried to pull myself together. "What? Oh yeah, I'm fine, just thinking about something. Maybe I can help." "No, it's work-related. You have nothing to worry about." That evening, I returned home to find Jessica getting ready for her trip. When I entered the bedroom, she quickly closed the suitcase. On another day, I would not have attached any importance to this, but today it had a special meaning. I wondered why she needed to take so many things for 3 days to visit our son and his wife. I made a comment about the weight of the suitcase as I lifted it from the bed. The next morning, I offered to take Jessica to the station. "Oh, no need, Derek. I'll call a taxi." "No, I insist. Why pay for a taxi if I have a car and time to take you? What kind of husband will I be if I don't spend every minute I can with my wife?" "Well, okay then, but you won't be able to get onto the platform." She went into another room, taking the phone with her. We had a normal ride to the station. Jessica talked about how excited she was to go see James and Emma. "It's a pity that you couldn't take a vacation and come with me, Derek." There was barely a tremor in her voice. I must admit, she was convincing. These last 2 years, we never rested together. But everything will change soon. "Why do you think so? What have you done?" There was alarm in her voice. "Oh, nothing. John just promised to sort it out when he got back from Brighton." "Hey, I was just thinking that maybe you too would take the same train." "I don't think so, Derek. And besides, he will probably travel in first class." She started to get nervous. At the station, I carried her suitcase to the turnstiles. "I'll call you when I get back from work." "No, don't call, Derek. Perhaps we will go out somewhere in the evening. I'll call you myself." She kissed me goodbye and told me she loved me. I went to work. Busy days lay ahead of me. I had no problem installing the camera in my bedroom. Only one webcam was needed. The hardest part was drilling a small hole in the wall to route the cable into the next room. I used this room as an office, so connecting the camera to my Linux computer was a breeze. I set it to automatically record every evening activity. John Preston's office turned out to be more complicated. First, I needed to gain access, and I didn't have a key. Like most colleges, the cleaners came early in the morning, so I arrived at work at 6:30 a.m. I headed to the administrative offices just as the cleaning lady was finishing cleaning. She was about to close the door when I called out to her. "There is no need to close the door. I'm here." "Oh, are you Mr. Preston? Nice to meet you." It turned out to be so simple. To automatically install updates, the college left the computers turned on overnight. This meant I didn't even have to find a computer for the camera. I used a wireless device and placed it on Preston's desk. Then, using the account of a student who had recently left college, I accessed the college servers. I soon had the ability to stream video to my computer, which I could activate remotely. Now all that remained was to wait for their return. On Friday morning, I called my son at home. Nobody answered. I called his work number. "Hello, James Callahan." "Hello, James. How are you?" "Oh, hi, Dad. I'm fine. How are you?" "Everything is fine, as always. I miss your mother, of course." I expected her to answer the phone when I called home. By the way, why aren't you there? You could take a couple of days off to spend time with your mom." He sounded embarrassed and didn't want to talk to me. "Oh, I took Wednesday and Thursday off, but today I had to go to work. My boss is getting ready for an important meeting on Monday, and I need to make sure he has everything." "Yes, I understand. Where's Emma? Did she have to work too?" No. I think she went shopping in Brighton with her mother." "Oh yes, Brighton. I could have guessed that she would be there." "Dad, I really need to finish my work. Why don't you call your mom on your cell phone?" "Yes, maybe I will do that." "Okay, I won't distract you, James. Take care of yourself." "You too, Dad. Bye." So, everything became clear. He knew and was ready to cover for her. I was sad to think that I would probably never see or hear from my son again. Wendy squeezed my hands. "So you renounced him. I guess I can understand it if he knew what she was doing and kept it from you. I think it's wrong, but I can understand." I was starting to get really nervous, and Wendy could see it. I sat, and she pressed me to her chest. I was very glad that she was there. Looking at her magnificent breasts was some kind of consolation at a time when my world was falling apart again. It took me a few minutes to come to my senses. "So you collected evidence and got a divorce. You don't go to jail for this, right?" "No, Wendy, they don't imprison you. And if it ended there, I'd be fine. I'm afraid I've gone further. You might not like me anymore when you find out what I did. I think it's up to me to decide, Derek. Now tell me the whole story to the end, and then we will invite that young man and find out what he needs." When Jessica came home on Sunday, I tried to act normal. Honestly, it wasn't difficult. We almost never had sex because she was always too tired. We barely saw each other for a week. On Tuesday evening, I checked the online broadcast from John Preston's office. And of course, once most of the people left, Jessica joined him. They started hugging and kissing when I went to teach my class. During the break, I checked the broadcast again and was just in time to see them having sex. When I finished class, they had already left and the office was empty. The next day, they left on time, so there was nothing to check. However, the camera in my bedroom recorded some pretty intense activity. This raised a lot of questions for me. On Thursday, they were in the office again. No wonder I didn't have sex. Even if she hadn't slept, she would have been too tired. I'm embarrassed to admit, but I let it go on for another 2 weeks to discover a pattern. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted to get back at them the same way they hurt me. I worked as if on autopilot. The only thing that kept me from leaving work every day was anger. People at work began to notice that I had become irritable. Students asked where my famous sense of humor had gone. The lovers, of course, did not notice anything. By the end of the second week, I knew what I was going to do. I knew that next Thursday night they would be having sex in the office again, so I made a plan. No one was surprised to see Dirty Harry at work over the weekend, so there were no questions asked when I arrived. I used the library computer and another account to create a website called Office Antics. There I set up video feeds and added links to various adult sites to make the site look authentic. I then created announcements for bulletin boards throughout the college. The site goes live at 18 o'clock on Thursday. Don't miss it. The site will go live this week for a limited time. Be one of the first to see this amazing content. Every time the ads were taken down, I put up new ones. I even posted them on library and church bulletin boards around town. On Thursday, I was ready. At 5:30 p.m., I added the final touch to the website. The video screen read, "Today's content is broadcast live from Broadcasting College." At 17:55, I checked the broadcast. Preston had already begun to unbutton Jessica's blouse. I went to a computer science class. Within the first 5 minutes, it became clear that there would be no lesson. At first, the students whispered. Then, as they started discussing more, the noise level increased so much that I could hear every word. "This is happening in our college. Hey, I recognize him. He is our deputy director. He teaches me mathematics. Who is this old woman he's having sex with? I don't know, but she has great breasts. I know her. This is his secretary. I'll send a message to my friends now. They can't miss it. Until this moment, I was a little ambivalent about what was happening. On the one hand, I was glad to expose them as liars. On the other hand, he had sex with my wife, the woman I loved for over 20 years. This love has made me forgive her a lot in the past, but not this time. My lesson had already been disrupted, but then a comment was made that pissed me off. Even when our sex life was great, Jessica never allowed me to do what he allowed. She said it was dirty and called me crazy for wanting it. A red veil covered my eyes. My rage was released. Without really thinking about what I was doing, I left my class and hurried to the administration building. I couldn't believe they were so careless. They didn't even lock the door. I burst into the office. I was furious. My anger was directed at both of them, but 20 years of love and an upbringing that taught me that hitting women was wrong meant that Preston took the brunt of it. Still half naked, she ran out to her reception area and returned with the phone. I heard her say, "Ambulance," she said. "There was an accident and one person was seriously injured. Better call the police, Jess. Half the world knows it wasn't an accident. Maybe you should get dressed." "What do you mean by half the world? How could they know?" "Your entertainment was broadcast on the internet this evening, as was my attack on Preston. However, it's still going. So get dressed and call the police." "Oh, Derek, you didn't do it, did you?" One look at my face told her that I really did it. She quickly began to collect her things and get dressed. As soon as she got dressed, she called the police. Jessica walked back and forth in the office until she turned to me again. "How clear were the images, Derek? Was it possible to understand who we were?" "Well, my students recognized him immediately. They didn't know who you were, but I think they know now." She covered her face with her hands. "Oh God, Derek, what should we do now?" "Well, I'm going to sit here and wait for the police. And you might want to go to the hospital with your friend." "It wasn't an affair, Derek, just sex." "Exciting sex because we did things we shouldn't, but it was still just sex. It doesn't matter now, Jess. You wanted or needed someone else, and now you don't have to hide. I'm going to be in prison for a while. You will be free to have sex with whoever you want." She sat down, putting her head in her hands and crying. The ambulance crew arrived first and began providing medical care to Preston. Jessica was faced with a choice: go with him to the hospital or wait for the police to arrive. As soon as the police arrived, I was taken away in handcuffs. It took the police 24 hours to decide whether to charge me with grievous bodily harm. 2 days later, I was already in court, where I was formally charged. I chose a duty lawyer, and he tried to get me released on bail. I told him not to do it, but he still felt it was his duty to try. The judge asked if I could post bail. "Your Honor, I don't have much money. My parents died, and I don't maintain contact with my wife and don't want to. I don't see how I can find money for bail." He looked at me intently. "Do you understand, Mr. Callahan, that without bail, I will have to keep you in custody? Do you want more time to talk with your wife?" "No, sir. It will be fine in custody." I was kept in custody for 2 months. My lawyer visited me frequently, urging me to plead not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. Jessica repeatedly asked permission to date, but I refused. My lawyer advised that under British law, a wife could not be forced to testify against her husband, and Jessica refused. However, the recording spread on the internet, so there were enough witnesses. A lot of unexpected things happen in prison. I received a letter from the college's Human Resources Department notifying me that I was subject to disciplinary proceedings and asking who I wanted to appoint as my representative. I found it funny that even in the face of overwhelming evidence, they still had to follow their procedures. I wrote back that I had no intention of defending myself. The next letter informed me that I had been fired and advised me of my right to appeal. Unable to see me, Jessica also began writing letters. "My dear Derek, I don't know how to apologize to you for what I did. Please believe that I didn't mean to hurt you and it had nothing to do with love. I cannot explain why I acted the way I did, but I must tell you that you were and will always be my only love. I know you were fired from college. They are waiting for John to leave the hospital so they can conduct his disciplinary proceedings. I told him that I would report to the director that he used his position to force me into sex if he did not drop the charges and withdraw his statement. I will do it, my love. I will do everything to get you out of there so I can start to atone for what I did to you. No matter how long it takes, I will wait for you, my love, and hope that one day you can forgive me. Love, Jessica. I crumpled the letter and threw it away. A month later, she wrote again. My dear Derek, I'm so sorry not only for what I did to you, but also for not being able to convince John to drop the charges. He did not believe that I would carry out my threat. He was wrong. I went with the union representative to the director and told him that John was putting pressure on me to agree to have sex and making sure that you were busy and could not interfere with us. I don't know if he believed me, but it didn't matter. The union has launched sexual harassment proceedings. John and I were fired. Unfortunately, this made John even more determined to send you to prison. Forgive me, my love. I did everything I could. Your lawyer says you're giving up your only defense. Please think, my love. You don't deserve to be there. You did it because we brought you to it. I will always love you and will wait as long as it takes. Love, Jessica. I admit I was surprised they fired Preston. I expected management to side with him, but Jessica left them no choice. My trial could hardly be called an event. My lawyer tried to convince me to apply for temporary insanity, but I again refused. I insisted on pleading guilty. I agreed for the lawyer to use strong provocation as a mitigating circumstance. My confession freed the prosecutor from having to present evidence other than the extent of John Preston's injuries. They did this by providing photographs and medical reports. Preston was unhappy that he was not invited to tell his version of events. Jessica and James attended the trial. Jessica cried most of the time, and James tried to console her. The judge listened to my lawyer's arguments about mitigating circumstances and then turned to me. Mr. Callahan, your lawyer has made a compelling case that you acted under a mental disorder. I assume you were suggested to use this as a defense. Yes, sir, they did. Do you want to change your confession? No, sir. I have committed crimes and am ready to be punished. Fine. Derek Callahan, you have pleaded guilty to causing grievous bodily harm to Mr. John Preston. This is a very serious crime for which I could sentence you to up to 20 years in prison. However, your lawyer has convincingly argued that Mr. Preston abused his position to get you out of the way so he could have an affair with your wife. I find this kind of provocation to be one that few men could resist. Even considering these circumstances, I would still have to sentence you to 10 years in prison. However, since you pleaded guilty immediately after your arrest, saving significant taxpayer dollars and saving the victim from having to relive the assault, I can, within established guidelines, reduce the sentence in half. Mr. Callahan, I sentence you to 5 years in prison. I looked at the public gallery. Preston clenched his fist as if celebrating some kind of victory. Jessica gasped and covered her face with her hands as I was led away in handcuffs. My lawyer came to my cell after the trial. Well, Mr. Callahan, I still think I could get you acquitted, but 5 years is a good result. If you behave well, you can get out in 2.5 or 3 years. I suppose I should thank you for this, but to be honest, I'm not sure I want to go out. What should I do here? My family is destroyed. My career is down the drain. I don't care when they release me. Why didn't you tell me all this before, Derek? It seems like I don't know you at all. Would I have gotten this job if they knew I had a criminal record? Of course not. Most people here wouldn't even talk to me if they knew. Would you let me get close to you? Aren't you wondering how to get rid of me now? If you think so, maybe I really should quit, as you put it. It is very difficult for me to believe that the man I know, whom I fell in love with, could do such a thing. From what you said, the outburst of violence was an immediate reaction, which, given the circumstances, I can understand. But the cold-blooded planning of your wife's humiliation is what I cannot believe. The man you fell in love with wouldn't do that. I'm the person you know, at least for now. Perhaps the judge and lawyer were right. Perhaps my peace of mind was disturbed. I couldn't believe she would break my heart again, but Preston was the one I wanted. He made a laughing stock of me. Some people probably knew that I was loaded with all the dirty work so that he could have sex with my wife. I wanted to see how they would deny the live broadcast. It went through their servers, so they couldn't tell that the recording came from somewhere else. Jessica was just collateral damage. To my surprise, Wendy pulled my head to her chest and held me as I cried, reliving that fateful day. Then she lifted my head and looked at me. "One more time, Derek. You said you couldn't believe she would break your heart again. Have you caught Jessica cheating before?" "I didn't catch her, no. She thinks I don't know, but it wasn't the first time. She's done this at least once before, shortly after we got married." "If you didn't catch her, then where did you get such confidence?" "I saw the evidence. Trust me, I'm sure." "Wait a minute, Derek. If you were in prison, how did you get this job? After all, for this, you need to provide a certificate of good conduct." I laughed. If people knew how easy it was to bypass such checks, they would not consider them so important. You'd be surprised how many Derek Calligans there are with clean records. I just needed to become one of them. We sat hugging each other. I felt relieved that she didn't leave me. I've lied every step of the way since I got out of prison, and I couldn't tell Wendy the truth. Several times I was close to this, but every time prudence won my courage. I wanted to tell her everything, and if I had the opportunity to marry her, I would do it. But in the current situation, it did not seem worth the risk, because the information could get out. Wendy removed her hand from my shoulders and took both of my hands. "Derek, you know we're going to have to talk to the young man behind the door. Now that he has found you, the game is over, unless we can convince him to remain silent. Now I will invite him, and you will talk to him. Please, Derek, please talk to him." She stood up and walked out to the door. When she returned, James followed. James was a handsome young man, 6 feet tall, with broad shoulders and an athletic build. He had light brown hair that turned almost blonde in the summer sun. He had a square jaw with a dimpled chin, and his blue eyes sparkled when he smiled. One look at Wendy's face told me she was impressed. She looked at me, then at him, then back at me. "Your wife must be a beautiful woman, Derek. He clearly didn't like you. I think you're attractive, but James here is probably every girl's dream." James smiled at her. "I'm content to be Emma's dream, thank you." "Well, James, you and Derek have a lot to talk about. I'll go make some coffee. Would you like some coffee?" James agreed to the offer of coffee, and Wendy went into the kitchen, leaving us alone. We sat in silence for about a minute. James was nervous, not knowing where to start, and watched me. I wasn't going to make it easy for him. I just relaxed on the couch and waited. Finally, he spoke. "Why did you do that, Dad?" "Let's give it up, James. You and half the world know why I did it." "That's not what I'm talking about. Why did you just disappear? You knew she was waiting for you. When you didn't answer any of her letters, she tried to get the warden to tell her when you would be released. We thought you had 3 more months left when the police came and told us you were already out. The prison gave your mother the address of the hostel where you went. I went there, but you left long ago. Why did you go to the hostel when you could have gone home? Why did you risk going back to prison by simply disappearing from the hostel? I don't know what she told you about what I did or why, but even from what was on the news, you have to understand that I couldn't come back." "Couldn't come back even for a few weeks, Dad? Do you really hate your mom so much that you chose to live in a Parolee hostel rather than go home to your own bed, at least for a while until you get back on your feet? She and her lover manipulated me for 2 years. I wasn't going to give her another chance. You should have read her letters. She wanted to try to fix everything. She knows how much she hurt you. She wanted to make amends. I've had enough, James. You didn't look for me to ask why I didn't come home. What do you want from me? What happens if you don't get it? Are you going to tell the police where I am so they can send me back to jail? I want you to go back and talk to her. She is sick, Dad, very sick. As long as she thought you would come back, she was fine. But when you disappeared, She started drinking a lot of alcohol. She now has liver problems and needs a transplant. But the operation won't be done until she stops drinking. I hate what she did to you, Dad, but she's the only mom I have. I can't watch her kill herself. I need you to tell her that you forgive her, so that she stops drinking. What if I don't, James? What then? Do I need to run again before the police come after me for violating my probation? Nothing, Dad. I don't want you to end up in that place again, and I don't think the police are interested. When I asked them to help me find you, they simply said they would find you when you committed another crime. Wendy returned with coffee. James seems to be saying reasonable things, Derek. You need to close this chapter, and if it helps your wife, then so much the better. I know you don't wish her harm. How do you know? Because you beat him but didn't touch her. I thought for a minute. I never thought about it, but she was right. I couldn't imagine hurting Jessica despite her betrayal. What harm could talking to her do, Derek? Now it was 2 against 1, and I began to lose. Okay, I'll go and talk to her, but don't expect anything to change. She'll have to accept the fact that I won't come back. I'll talk to her on one condition, I said, turning to James. You will stop calling me Daddy. He just shook his head. One mistake 2.5 years ago, and he disowned me. What should I do now? Give him time, James. I'm sure he will change his mind. We left the next day, all three of us. James didn't want Wendy to come with us because he didn't want Jessica to know that I had found another woman. I insisted that she go. I wanted everything to be honest and open. James tried to carry on a conversation along the way, but it was difficult. I didn't intentionally ignore him. My thoughts were just busy with something else. I kept replaying in my head the events of those days that led to my attack on Preston. It felt strange to move into the yard of my old house again. If I didn't know that they lived here, I would think that the house was empty. The grass needs mowing. The curtains hung unevenly, and the windows were in desperate need of cleaning. James had his own key and opened the door for us. I have never seen my house in such a mess. James led us into the living room and asked us to sit down. He then went upstairs to get his mother. It took him quite a long time. When Jessica finally entered the room, I barely recognized her. Her face was emaciated and her skin had a yellowish tint. She had lost a lot of weight and her dress was hanging on her. Seeing me, she tried to smile and extended her arms towards me. Derek, you've come home. No, Jess, I came to talk to you. I'm not coming home ever. Wendy squeezed my hand and looked at me tenderly, which made Jessica feel uneasy. James helped her sit up. I wish I could say you look good, Jess, but you know you don't. Still the same Derek, he can't lie to save his life. They told me that this is why you ended up in prison. It's in the past, Jess. It's all over. Jane said you want to talk to me, so go ahead and talk. Now that you're finally here, I don't know where to start. Have you read my letters? Only 2 that you sent while I was in custody. I didn't even open the rest. Do you hate me that much, Derek? You didn't have to answer, but if I knew you'd at least read them, it would make me feel better. Hatred has nothing to do with it, Jess, rather the opposite. I loved you so much that the only way to deal with what we did to each other was to simply cut that part out of my life. I didn't want to think about it anymore. Do you want to know why I didn't read your letters? Because in prison, a man who sits in his cell and cries is actually dead. So this is it, Derek? Have you cut me out of your life without a chance for forgiveness? I don't know, Jess. I don't hate you, so maybe I've already forgiven you. I hate what you did just as much as I hate what I did. What I did to you was cruel and heartless. I should have just divorced you. In fact, I should have divorced you the first time. Jessica's mouth dropped open in surprise. She raised her hands to her face and began to cry. Gathering her strength, she looked at me through eyes red from tears. You knew all this time and didn't say anything. Why? By the time I found out the truth, it was all over, and you had the child I couldn't seem to give you. I took a tattered envelope from my pocket and handed it to James. This is why you shouldn't call me Daddy. I'm not your father. James looked at the letter as he took it out of the envelope. I don't understand. What is this? These are the results of a DNA paternity test. You were the subject of the test, and as you can see, we are not related. The only sounds in the room were Jessica's sobs. Wendy looked between James and Jessica, not knowing who to comfort first. In the end, she decided to support Jessica. James was shocked. I don't understand. If you are not my father, then who are you? I think it was a man named Donald Wilson. She and your mother were very close for a while, too close for my liking. She assured me that there was nothing between them. It seems they had a falling out right when your mother got pregnant. 6 months after you were born, he died in a car accident. So how long have you known about this? Judging by the date, I was 2 years old when this test was done. I suspected the truth in the first few months after you were born. We both had dark hair and brown eyes. When your eyes didn't change color to brown or even green, I knew you were probably not mine. This thought haunted me. I had to find out the truth. When paternity tests became available, I got tested. So you knew all this time and didn't do or say anything. Why? Because the boy needs a father and we need a child. So you just decided to raise someone else's child and not tell anyone about it for 25 years? Didn't you think I had a right to know? Let me ask you something, James. In your first 20 years, did you ever feel unloved and unwanted? Until the moment you decided to deceive me with your mother, did you ever feel that you were not your favorite son? You know it's not. Whatever it was, I didn't know what was going on. Mom said she's preparing some kind of surprise for you. The way I see it, James, your mother is still your mother, your father is dead, and you had a foster father for 25 years. Unless you're saying I shouldn't have given you this, get off your throne and deal with it. Wendy intervened, trying to calm us down. Derek, I think we could all use a cup of tea. Why don't we go and cook it while James and Jessica digest that bomb you just dropped? I took Wendy into the kitchen. A picture appeared before us that I never expected to see. The sink was full of dirty dishes. The countertops were dirty and covered in bottles. Wendy and I looked around and then looked at each other. Sorry, Wendy. It seems like cleaning should be a priority. She stood in front of me, hugged me, and hugged me tightly. Yesterday, I said that you are no longer the man I knew. I take back my words. Any person who went through all this for so many years would inevitably go crazy. You really should have agreed to temporary insanity. She pulled my head down and kissed me. Okay, Derek, let's get down to business. We put away the bottles and washed the surfaces and then got to work on the dishes. An hour later, we returned with tea. James and his mother sat together on the sofa, their arms around each other. Wendy served the tea to Jessica, who looked her up and down. Derek was very careless in not introducing you. Are you his girlfriend? Take care of him. He needs a good woman. I will if he lets me. Because of my excitement, I forgot about decency. I introduced Wendy as my friend. I think she's more than just a friend, Derek. You look at her the same way you once looked at me, before I ruin everything. You're right, Jess. She's more than a friend. She is the best thing that happened to me in the last 5 years. But we're not here to talk about me and Wendy, right? You wanted to talk to me, so what did you want to say? We sat in silence, drinking tea. Jessica tried to gather her thoughts to express what was on her soul. She took a deep breath, looked me in the eyes, and spoke. Derek, James made it clear to me that there is no chance of you coming home. This is not my home anymore, Jess. Please don't interrupt, Derek. This is already difficult. I would like to explain it as far as I understand it myself. She paused and then began again. It's not enough, but I'm sorry for what I did to you. I tried to understand why I did it because I really love you. I guess it's hard to believe. You see, I've always been able to compartmentalize my life, almost as if I had several lives. In your life with John Preston, you existed only as some kind of abstract concept, like some kind of conditional husband. In your life, he was just a faceless man who was your boss. When I was with him, I'm sorry to say, but I didn't think about you. When I was with you, I didn't think about him. Of course, there were moments between these lives when I tried to maintain balance, and only then did I feel guilty about what I did to you. I felt guilty, Derek, honestly. But it was so exciting. He had power over you and over me. They say power is an aphrodisiac, and it is true. He had power over me. He made me available, making sure you were always busy. The fact that he wanted me was enough. I said he used his position to force me into it, but he didn't have to force me. I just said that to try to get him to drop the assault charges. So there was no love there. Not at all, Derek. It was just sex and the excitement of doing something forbidden with a man who had power. So why did you cover him up to protect him from me? I did it to protect you from yourself. I've never seen you like this. I thought you would kill him. I didn't know you broadcast everything on the internet. I thought that if he didn't get seriously injured, we could say it was an accident. You took a big risk. I could hurt you. No, you couldn't. Not you. No matter how angry you are, you couldn't hurt me. Preston would never say it was an accident. If I had been the only witness, he wouldn't have had much of a choice. But you posted it on the internet. Why did you do this? Did you hate me that much? I realized that most of the college management must have known what was going on. I wanted to make sure Preston and the others couldn't get away with it, so I made sure there were many witnesses. They couldn't deny that this happened after the video went viral. I didn't want to hurt you, but at that moment I didn't care if I did. I didn't plan to attack him. I just lost control. Well, if you wanted to harm the college management, you succeeded. Even the head of the IT service was fired. The college was absorbed into Amblesham College. You should have read my letters, Derek. You destroyed them. I couldn't find a job either. I had to work part-time jobs to somehow make ends meet. Suddenly, James intervened in the conversation. Perhaps Dad wouldn't have lost control if this was the first time you betrayed him. But you already betrayed him when you slept with my father. Jessica snapped back at him with a force she seemed incapable of. Don't ever call that bastard your father. He was just a jerk who liked to have sex, but he ran away when he found out I was pregnant. There were some very tense moments in our marriage because of our failures with our children. When I met Donald, I was an easy target for anyone who could offer a friendly shoulder. He offered me sympathy and made me believe that Derek didn't really want kids. He gradually achieved his goal. I thought I loved Donald, and I thought he loved me, but I was wrong on both counts. When I became pregnant, I thought that he would be happy and leave his wife, whom, according to him, he did not love. Instead, he wanted me to marry you to Derek's child and continue with my life as before. Then I realized that he didn't love me. It was just some fun for him on the side. I told him I didn't want to see him anymore, and I never saw him again. I'm glad he died because then he would never try to claim you as his. When I told your dad, Derek, your real dad, he was overjoyed and couldn't wait to be a dad. I had no idea he knew. James was left in limbo, and I have to say I felt sorry for him. However, I still found it difficult to forgive him, not because he was the son of another, but because he helped my mother deceive me. Emotions ran high, and it was too much for me. I had to put an end to this. So, Jess, you wanted to see me, and now you have. What's next? You must understand that there is no return for us. I guess you're right, Derek. I hoped that I could make amends to you, but I see that this is difficult to achieve. I wonder if we could become friends. It's up to you, Jess. I don't have many friends who are alcohol dependent. I'll clean myself up, Derek. I promise. I was accepted into a rehabilitation program. If I can hold out for 6 months, they will consider a liver transplant. Do you think you can handle it? I'll try, Derek, especially if we can be friends. I know you won't be able to visit me, but can I write to you? Will you read my letters? Right, Jess, I will read them. I can't promise anything more. We called it a day, and I got back into the car to head home. The ride was quiet at first. Wendy squeezed my leg or pressed her face against my hand over and over again. When we stopped at one of the service stations along the highway, we started talking. At first, it was just idle talk about whether we should get something to eat. Once we had decided what we were going to eat and sat down at the table, Wendy decided to get to the point. Now I know everything, Derek. Or is there something else I should know about? Only what happened in prison. I haven't told anyone about this, and probably never will. She reached out her hand and squeezed mine. Was it really that bad there? I did things there that I'm proud of, but I also had to do things that I would never do in normal life. But my life was much better than many. Do you think you could ever be Jessica's friend? I don't know. We'll try. That's all I can say now. What about James? You gave him some serious news today. Now everything is in his hands. Now that he knows the truth, it's up to him to decide what to do next. Wendy took both of my hands. You know, you made me proud today. Now I know. I smiled at her. Can I count on a reward? I think you have a good chance, she said with a smile. We finished our lunch and walked back to the car with our arms around each other. I was truly rewarded that night and on many subsequent nights as well. The first letter from Jessica came a week into her rehab stay. She found it difficult to live without alcohol, but she was determined to get through it. She couldn't help but apologize, but she didn't try to convince me to come back anymore. I was impressed and responded to her, expressing my support. For 3 months, we exchanged letters, each one more friendly than the previous one. I started to believe that we could become friends. She got out of rehab, gained some weight, and got a job. She still had health problems and was still awaiting a liver transplant. I hoped for her recovery. I was surprised when the correspondence stopped. Everything seemed to be going well, but she stopped answering my letters. I was amazed at how it affected me. I felt like she had failed me again. Wendy tried to keep my spirits up. She said there was a good reason for this, and that Jessica would contact me again sooner or later. The first snow this year fell on the first day of December. By the next weekend, we had 2 inches of white cover covering everything. Staff cleared the paths, but the grass and the rest of the landscape looked like a Christmas card. I finished my morning classes on Saturday. Walking out into the yard, I was completely taken by surprise. James stood leaning against the wall of the archway and greeted me as I emerged from the laboratory. Well, Dad, even in winter, it's beautiful here. Damn, what a place to hide. James, now you know the whole truth, so you know that we are not related. Look, I know what you said, but Mom was right. It doesn't matter who the biological father was. You are the only father I have ever known, and I think you did a great job. So no matter what you say, I will always consider you my father, and I'm sorry that I let you down. I hugged him by the shoulders. Well, to me, you are still the best son I ever had. We started walking along the path towards the galleries. Jessica hasn't written for a long time. How is she? James stopped and put his hand on my forearm. She died. She died last Friday. Her heart stopped. After her first heart attack, she signed a do not resuscitate order. She could not come to terms with the thought of life on dialysis, and doctors refused to do a transplant. I stopped and looked at him. I saw tears form in his eyes and felt my own begin to well up. Now there were no barriers between us. We threw ourselves into each other's arms and burst into tears. We stood for several minutes, hugging tightly, our bodies shaking with tears. I fought back tears as I pulled away from him and wiped my eyes with a handkerchief. Why didn't she tell me? She didn't have to die alone. She wasn't alone, Dad. I was with her. So why didn't you call me? She knew that I had forgiven her. I would have come if you called. That's why she didn't let me call you. The reason she stopped texting is because someone told the press that she was texting you. A journalist visited her. With the anniversary of those events approaching, he wanted to find you. Mom was determined not to cause you any more suffering. She knew you couldn't work as a teacher if you had a criminal record, so either the school didn't check it or you got a fake certificate. If this came out, you would be destroyed again. She didn't let that happen and told me not to contact you. Even after all this time, They still want to make a big deal out of this? Are you sure? Yes, I'm sure. That slimy bastard found me too. Tried to convince me that he wanted to tell your version of events. Mom said it would be bad for you. I know it's hard to believe after what she did, but she really loved you. You are right. It's hard to believe, but I thank you both for your concern. I really loved her. After all these years, I can't just turn off these feelings. When is the funeral? Tuesday, but don't even think about coming there. You can't take that risk. If you're not there, our friend from the press might fall behind. I put my arm around his shoulders as we turned back towards my apartment. Let's go, son. Let's see if Wendy can make you lunch. I think we're ahead of you, Dad. Emma and I arrived around 10. She and Wendy have been preparing dinner for a long time. The girls went shopping around 10:30. We walked to my door, and I led us into the empty apartment. I got beer for James and myself. We sat on the sofa and drank while waiting for the girls to return. So, Dad, what will happen to us now? Mom was the only link between us, and now she is gone. What now? Will I ever see you again? Don't get me wrong, James. Wendy didn't think Jessica was going to die, but she asked me a similar question on the way back from our visit. We may not share the same DNA, but I always considered you my son and loved you like my own. Like I said, all these years of love can't just be turned off, but now it's all up to you. So, James, what do you want? He sat sipping beer. I don't want anything to change. As my mother said, you are my real father. I will always consider you as my dad, and I want you to always consider me as your son. If this is what you want, then so be it, I said, hugging him. We both fought back tears as we held each other in our arms. We were still sitting there hugging each other when the door opened and Wendy came in. Well, it looks like you guys have finally come to terms with your feelings. James and I split up. I got up to help with the shopping. Emma followed Wendy into the apartment. Seeing me, she screamed and rushed towards me. Oh, Derek, it's so great to see you again. So much time has passed, too much. She took a step back and looked at me. You look great. Looks like this place is right for you. I looked her up and down. My son definitely had good taste. She had shoulder-length honey blonde hair, blue eyes, full lips, and high cheekbones. Her breasts seemed larger than I remembered, and as my gaze dropped lower, I saw the reason. Her usually slender figure now had a noticeable bulging belly. I see you noticed Derek Jr. Isn't this a miracle? I smiled at her. Derek Jr., are you serious? If you don't mind. James wanted this, and I agree. We love you, Derek. James was devastated by what happened to you. He loved Jessica, so this whole thing was tearing him apart. As soon as we found out we were having a boy, James decided to name him after you. Please say you don't mind. What could I say? I was quite happy with it. The three of us sat and chatted while Wendy prepared dinner. The atmosphere at dinner was tense, mixing the sweet with the bitter. The joy of our family reunion was intertwined with the sadness of Jessica's death. It was difficult for me to accept that I would not be able to attend her funeral, but her reasons were valid. For the first time since that fateful night, I realized that I had forgiven her. I still couldn't understand why she did what she did, but I had to accept that, in a way, she did love me. Perhaps if I don't show up at the funeral, the press will leave me alone. Wendy certainly thought so because she started making plans for Christmas. James, I'm really sorry, but I was hoping Derek would spend Christmas with me and my daughters. But for the new year, I would like to come to you. It would be like a new beginning for all of us. Emma was delighted. Wendy, I think this is a great idea. We'll invite my parents for Christmas, and you and Derek for New Year's. James moved on to practical matters. Now the house is completely yours. You need to think about what you are going to do with it. And of course, there is still money. Money? What money? I thought she was broke. The union filed a lawsuit against the college for sexual harassment. They settled the matter out of court for £40,000. She didn't want to take the money because she knew it was a lie. But once she started the process, she couldn't back down. She was going to give you this money when you got out of prison to help you get back on your feet. I can't think about it right now, James. I need time. We did spend Christmas with Wendy's daughters, and I was warmly received. Both were glad that their mother had found someone. We arrived in Ditchling late morning on New Year's Eve. I talked to James about house and money. We agreed that he would rent out the house. I rented an apartment for a short period of time, just long enough to get a utility bill and open a bank account. As soon as the account was opened, I moved out of the apartment and did everything via the internet. James said he would have a lawyer transfer the money to my new account. You know, James, like your mother, I don't want this money. They are tainted. Well, Dad, someone has to get them if you don't want the bankers to take advantage of them. Wendy and I talked. We want you to set up a trust fund for the education of Derek Jr. and any other children you have. When you do this, I will transfer all the money there. Something good has to come out of this mess. If that's what you want, Dad, I'll do it. Transfer the proceeds from renting the house to a new account, and I will withdraw them in cash. Well, if you're careful, that should keep your location a secret. That night, we all went to a New Year's party. At midnight, as expected, we counted down the last seconds of the outgoing year and raised a toast to the new one. When the screams died down, I looked at my loved ones, poured them some more, and proposed another toast. Ladies and gentlemen, for a new beginning. We raised our glasses and drank. When we set them up, I walked over to Wendy and got down on one knee in front of her. Wendy Turnbull, will you do me the honor of becoming my wife? Wendy put her arms around my neck. Oh yes, Derek, yes, yes, yes. I put the wedding ring on her finger. It was a perfect fit, just like we were for each other. Sitting and looking at the small diamond, I stood up. I had the best feeling in the last 7 years. It truly was a new beginning. Subscribe to our channel so that your love doesn't cheat on you, and go ahead and listen to the next story, because this story is nothing compared to the next one. If you're under 18, don't even think. Click to the next one. Click to the next one. Click to the next one.